Last week, it did come out that the FA was going to be making budget cuts, and that has affected you guys who play for England in the futsal team. I'm joined by Payne and Stuart. Thanks, guys, for coming along tonight. Would it be fair to say that you're shocked and heartbroken by the FA's decision?
Yeah, 100%. I think they're definitely the two words that I'd use to describe how I'm feeling, let alone how the thoughts and feelings of colleagues, teammates, friends, kids, all the way up and down the pathway and across the country, who have an impact and a part to play in futsal.
Obviously, I've been around the programme a lot longer than Joe has, who sort of started his journey out. So I've experienced sort of the last 10 or 11 years, traveling the world and meeting people and trying to inspire sort of the next generation. My eldest lad's 13, and he's sort of decided that futsal's the route he wants to follow because of me, and I'm also sort of coaching a lot of young lads who want to follow and sort of dedicate themselves down the futsal route. And I think it's really disappointing from a long-term point of view that they won't get to sort of have the experiences that I've already had.
And 11 years in futsal for you, that's like, you must have seen quite a lot of changes, and I'm guessing that now it's getting bigger than it was when you first started. So to see that change now and the budget's being cut, like, that must be a personal hit to you.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few of us who have dedicated a lot, a long period of time to the sport, and like you say, there has been some down times. We've had some times where the FA have cut back things, and a turnover of staff has always been there. But it's felt sort of in the last 2 to 3 years that the sport is grown so much, both not just in terms of participation within England, but the respect that it's gaining around the world because of the number of players that play it, not only as a sport in itself, but in a sport that developed some of the world's best, like Neymar and Ronaldo and all the ones that are constantly sort of linked with it and talked with it about. And it felt like we were really gaining some momentum. It's recently become a GCSE option for teenagers, and there was talk about it becoming the indoor game of choice for schools and trying to get it within the curriculum, and that was where we all thought the game was heading. And it's a real setback. We could be talking, not just a short-term setback, but we could be talking going back to where I was 10 years ago, where nobody knew what it was, and you're having to explain yourself to everybody. Hopefully, it doesn't come to that, but at the moment, it feels like that's the direction we're heading.
That is also a risk, isn't it? The fact that if they cut the budget so much that it might just disappear altogether. Is that something that you guys are currently talking about and worried about?
I'd say that's probably what's at the forefront of our minds, really. I mean, more so what Cookie said then around the fact of, obviously, he's been around the programme a lot longer than what I have, but so he's had so many experiences that I'm sure you'd be happy to say, Cook, that you feel lucky and privileged to have those experiences. And,
yeah, 100%.
And there's going to be a whole generation of kids that potentially is going to be taken away from to experience that elite performance for playing for your country, for doing what so many people try to and don't. But it's not the fact whether they could not get there, it's the fact of having the opportunity of being able to get there and just being able to have the opportunity. That's it, really. Just have that opportunity. And if they take the team away, if they take the pathway away and the funding, then that opportunity, that dream is non-existent, no matter how difficult it is from one place to another.
So how did it actually come out that you guys found out about this? Because you weren't told directly by the FA, were you?
Well, we were invited to a meeting via Zoom, as is the new era, on the 15th of September. But on the day of the meeting, it was cancelled or postponed. And we didn't hear anything again until the following week. On the Monday, I think it was the following week, The Guardian released an email with some leaked information around the budget cuts and sort of the FA's intention. And then the following day, we were sort of rushed to attend a meeting that evening where they basically gave us a statement that sort of went out via the FA the following morning it was. So we found out via Zoom. We got the opportunity to ask some questions. I think the biggest problem around the meeting that we attended was that the two gentlemen who hosted it for us from the FA couldn't really answer some of the questions that were raised, and so from that point, really, we've been seeking some further guidance and advice as to why such drastic cuts have been measured towards futsal, as opposed to sort of keeping it across the board. I think they announced it was something around 20% they needed to cut, and we've obviously experienced the best part of 100% budget cut. They're keeping some commercial finances there for grassroots, but again, it's in comparison to what it was previously, it's minuscule.
So I guess you guys must be feeling a little bit singled out at the moment then, that it's all going on to futsal rather than sort of being evened out throughout the whole system in the FA.
Yeah, I think obviously numbers talk, and like Cookie said then, you've got the FA come out and said themselves that they've got around a 20% budget decrease to find because of the whole COVID situation. And futsal are more than happy to play their fair share and part of that budget cut to help the FA be in a better place than what they are currently. But to receive an almost 100%, well, it is 100% of optional budget that, to the sport that's been invested over the last few years, that's been now taken away, with the only budget coming in and funding coming in from a contract point of view. It's almost gives you the feeling like the FA is giving up hope on the sport, and that is how we're left sitting.
How much funding were you receiving from the FA?
We're not privy to the exact figures. So if we were going to quote something, it would only be what we've seen in the leaked right. Guardian article.
What I've seen is that it's approximately something like £300 million that's being cut. Does that sound right?
I think it's £300 million across a 3 or 4 year period for the entire of the FA. So again, talking from the leaked article, we're led to believe that the entire futsal budget from elite to grassroots is somewhere around 900k. And like I say, it feels like even 100% cut, it's a drop in the ocean for a company the size of the FA's to like I say to decimate a sport for such a small amount of money in comparison to the millions that we spend across other areas of football.
As a sport in itself, how much money does it actually generate for the FA and put back into the grassroots?
I suppose it's that question is difficult because a lot of us who participate, play, and the sport itself is ran is very much on a volunteers basis. Where obviously when we talk about money, and you're usually talking about a professional point of view, football, for example, is professional across the women's and men's forms of the game, whereas futsal in this country isn't a professional sport. We all have our day jobs, and that plays into factor in terms of bringing in money to the FA. I think in terms of the old saying, you need to spend money to make money, there are countries around the world that are profitable organisations through futsal and successful franchises. The LNFS, which is the Spanish First Division, is a prime example of that. So there is money to be made in futsal from an athlete's and a franchise point of view. Because if there wasn't, there wouldn't be so many of the countries striving and as published this week, pumping excess millions into the sport across Europe.
What are your hopes now then? I see that you've set up a petition that you're putting out on your Twitter, but what is the aim? Are you wanting the FA to rethink the figures that they're trying to cut down, or are you hoping that a brand like, say, Nike or Adidas or something is going to come in and sponsor the England team and help that way?
I think first and foremost, one of the things that I want to make clear is, and I think it's across the board for the entire squad who are sort of, I suppose, spearheading this campaign, is that it's not necessarily about us. There are some players who are only just starting out their journey, Joe being one of them, he's got a handful of caps. But to me, it doesn't matter if I don't play for England again. But I don't think it's fair that the generation below me and below them and so on won't have the opportunity to do that. You know, we're talking about the budget cuts for us as an England squad, which obviously, you know, is disappointing. But ultimately, there's huge budget cuts across the grassroots of futsal as well. And as I said before, you know, the participation numbers released by the FA previously show that the game is growing. I think from between 2018 and 2019, it grew 100% in participation numbers. It's really important that's the biggest problem. You know, it's not us, it's not the England team, but at grassroots level, a lot of players, a lot of kids around the country are now choosing futsal over football, and they see it as a realistic ambition that playing for England is part of their future and their pathway. So whilst yes, we want an England team back, we just want them to have the opportunity to have those experiences that we have. And just to touch on what Joe said there around, you know, other nations currently backing futsal, you know, across the world, you know, FIFA control futsal, and it is seen as a huge development tool for football. Obviously, it's a sport within its own right, and you know, there are a lot of people who argue that it shouldn't be linked to football. I'm not necessarily one of them. I think they go hand in hand. But the fact that countries like Spain, France, and Germany currently are all throwing serious money at futsal as both a sport in itself, recognising with input in their national team, as well as at grassroots level for women as well. I think that shows that it's not just a flash in the pan. It is seen as something that can really help grow the overall product of football and not just be treated as a development tool. You know, like I say, I think Joe mentioned that Spain have announced that they're investing €8 million in their futsal programs over the next 4 years. So that's €2 million a year. €2 million a season or a year. France are currently starting their women's team and starting a women's pathway up. And in Germany, their FA are investing in starting a fully professional futsal league, where all the clubs will start to generate grassroots participation. You know, it's not just about the England team. It's the bigger picture. They're not just taking away the option for me or for Joe to play for England. They're taking away the option for the rest of the generation to even have futsal as a desired pathway. We're basically saying it's football or nothing. Whereas, you know, in the other nations, it's ingrained in their culture, and you see that's borne out in the results on the football pitch. If that's what the FA care about, then why aren't we following suit of the nations who are winning World Cups? We haven't won a World Cup for 60 years. It's not always a short-term fix. Sometimes you've got to think a little bit more long-term, and this decision feels really short-sighted, and the decision-making around it needs to have some justification.
So how can we get on board, and how can we help you?
Mainly, it's to get the petition out there. I mean, the petition really is to make the FA question the decision and try and get some transparency around it. You know, did they do an impact assessment? Is it purely just a financial decision? If it is, does our budget really help the England women's and men's team win a World Cup within the next 4 years? I mean, we're talking a couple of the senior teams' weekly wages.
I think a big standout point for me, kind of you touched on it, Cookie. You started futsal about 11 years ago. I'm 23, so there's an age gap between me and you, and then there's also that I'm like the middle ground between what we're talking about, that younger generation, and I've seen it firsthand. I was brought through futsal through a school's point of view, and I was lucky to actually have that as an opportunity right at the end. And I know so many kids, because I'm still in touch with my PE teacher, who tells me about the fact it's in their curriculum and that they're fortunate to have it, and it's one of the preferred choices. And the thought of taking that away for such a small amount of money, it really is a drop in the ocean, to take away dreams and opportunity away from kids. It doesn't seem feasible. It really doesn't.